Someone collapses on a crowded street. 50 people walk past. Nobody stops. You've seen it in a video online. You told yourself you'd be different. But the truth is stranger and more uncomfortable than you think, and it has nothing to do with how good a person you are. Your brain is running a hidden calculation right now. It runs every time you see someone in trouble. It happens faster than thought, and you never chose to install it. Where did it come from? Go back further than you'd expect. Long before phones, long before cities, your ancestors lived in small bands, maybe 30 people, sometimes fewer. Everyone knew everyone. If someone screamed, you knew exactly who it was. You knew if it was your sister, your child, your friend. Responsibility was never a question. It was assigned by proximity and by name. That world shaped the wiring you still carry. But the world you live in now looks nothing like it. In 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in New York. News reports at the time claimed dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The details of that specific story were later disputed and partly exaggerated. But the question it raised was real, and it refused to go away. Why does a crowd of witnesses sometimes produce less help, not more? Two psychologists decided to find out. Bibb Latané and John Darley ran a series of experiments in the late 1960s. They put people in a room, alone or with others, and staged an emergency. Smoke seeping under a door. A person having a seizure over an intercom. Again and again, the pattern held. The more people present, the less likely any single person was to act. Alone, most people helped almost immediately. In a group, many did nothing at all. They named it diffusion of responsibility. When one person witnesses an emergency, the weight of it lands entirely on them. When 10 people witness it, that same weight splits 10 ways. Everyone assumes someone else has already made the call. Everyone waits. Nobody acts. Feel that for a second. It's not that a crowd makes people crueler. It's that a crowd makes each person feel less essential. Your ancestors never had that problem. In a band of 30, there was no anonymous crowd to hide inside. There was only you and the person who needed you. There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it's just as strange. Psychologists call it pluralistic ignorance. Picture a room full of strangers. Something ambiguous happens. Is that man on the floor drunk, or is he having a heart attack? Everyone glances around. Nobody looks alarmed, so nobody wants to be the one who overreacts. Each person reads the calm expressions of the others as proof that nothing is actually wrong. But everyone in that room might be quietly panicking behind a neutral face. The crowd convinces itself of its own calm, and the emergency gets erased by silence. Your ancestors rarely faced ambiguity like this. Danger back then was loud, immediate, and unmistakable. A predator, a fire, a scream from someone you loved. There was no scanning a stranger's face for social cues before deciding whether to act. Today, most of your emergencies are filtered through exactly that kind of hesitation. Here's the twist that changes everything. Latané and Darley's studies weren't really measuring cowardice. They were measuring a system, and once you understand the system, you stop being trapped inside it. Years later, researchers Daniel Batson and John Darley tested something related, sometimes called the Good Samaritan study. They asked seminary students, people training to become religious ministers, to walk across campus to give a talk. Some were told they had plenty of time. Others were told they were already late. Along the route, an actor slumped in a doorway, groaning, clearly in distress. The students who felt rushed were far less likely to stop and help, even though many of them were on their way to deliver a talk about compassion itself. It wasn't a lack of character. It was a narrow window of attention, closed by urgency. Think about how often you move through your own day in exactly that kind of hurry. Rushing to a meeting, rushing to catch a train. Your attention narrows, and the narrowing itself becomes the barrier. Not indifference, just a mind that has run out of room. So what actually breaks the spell? Researchers found one method that reliably works: direct address. If you're ever in a crowd during an emergency, don't shout for somebody to call for help. Point at one specific person. Say what they're wearing. Say, "You, in the blue jacket, call an ambulance now." The moment responsibility lands on one identifiable person, the diffusion collapses instantly. The crowd disappears and it becomes exactly what your ancestors always understood. One person, one task, no one else to hide behind. That single insight rebuilds the ancient system inside a modern crowd. It doesn't require 30 people who know your name. It only requires one person who suddenly, unmistakably, does. Think about how many moments in your life run on the opposite instinct. A group chat where a friend mentions they're struggling, and you assume someone else will reach out first. A coworker visibly overwhelmed, and you assume someone closer to them will step in. None of that makes you a bad person. It makes you a person running very old software inside a very new environment, one your ancestors never had to navigate, surrounded by more strangers in a single afternoon than they encountered in a lifetime. Understanding the mechanism doesn't excuse it. It arms you against it. The next time you're standing in a crowd and something feels wrong, you now know what your brain is quietly doing. It's counting heads and dividing the weight of responsibility among them. It's scanning faces for a panic that everyone is just as busy hiding. Knowing that is often enough to interrupt it. You don't have to outthink evolution. You just have to recognize the moment it's steering you toward silence. So the next time you see 50 people walk past someone who needs help, remember that none of them decided to be cruel. They're only doing what human minds have always done, in a crowd too large for any one person to feel essential. And now you know the one thing that was missing every single time. Not more witnesses, just one voice pointed directly at you.